I've lived in Buckridge Ridge Estates for 8 years. Quiet place. Big sky, even bigger yards. The kind of neighborhood where folks pretend to mind their business. Unless your grass gets half an inch too high, or your mailbox flag squeaks the wrong way in the wind. So when I bought a plot of forested land just beyond the HOA boundary lines for weekend hunting and solitude, I thought, finally, peace. Turns out peace doesn't sit well with HOA Karens, especially when it involves guns. It happened on a Saturday morning. I was out early, just me, a bow, my old boots, and a thermos of coffee strong enough to remove paint. I tracked a wild boar that had been tearing through gardens around the outskirts for weeks. Got a clean shot. One crack of my rifle echoed through the trees, and that was it. I dragged the hog back to my truck, proud, quiet, and ready for some grilling. And then I saw her, standing on the edge of the trail with a Starbucks cup, yoga pants, and that horrified stare like I'd just drop-kicked a puppy. She gasped, "You're hunting? Here?" I nodded, "On my land." She jabbed her finger toward the trees. "You're endangering the community. I take my walks right over there." I looked past her. The trail she was pointing to? Not HOA land, not even public. It was old logging road that ran parallel to my property, overgrown, forgotten. Except to a few power hiking retirees and Karen's Wellness Brigade. Still, I stayed calm. "I'm well within my rights," I said. "I've got tags. I'm out of HOA jurisdiction, and that hog's been digging up people's backyards, including yours." She didn't care. Instead, she pulled out her phone and said the 5 words HOA nightmares are made of. "I'm reporting you to the board." I laughed, and that was my first mistake. By Monday, I had a letter taped to my door. Violation. Use of firearms within community proximity. Fine, $500, 0 cents. Notes: endangerment, public disturbance, failure to notify HOA of hazardous activities. I read it 3 times, then a 4th, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. They were finding me for legally hunting on my own land. The kicker? The letter was signed not by Dale, the HOA president, but Karen. She had somehow pushed it through as an emergency executive action. Whatever that meant. I called Dale. "Yeah," he sighed. "She caught everyone off guard. Said it was urgent. We're reviewing it this week." "But Dale," I said, "my land's outside the HOA. You guys can't fine me for using it." He paused. "Technically, no, but there's concern about optics." Optics. The HOA version of facts don't matter if Karen's loud enough. I told him I wasn't paying a dime. He said I might want to reconsider for the sake of neighborly harmony. I hung up and started plotting, because if they wanted to mess with my rights, I'd make sure they remembered exactly where my land ended and theirs began. The next board meeting was standing room only. Dale invited me to speak. Karen insisted I be limited to 3 minutes, no outbursts, no props. I brought a fold-out map the size of a twin mattress just to spite her. I stood in front of the HOA's fold-up banquet table like I was delivering a TED Talk on rural property law. "This," I said, pointing to the yellow nick section, "is my land. Outside HOA boundaries, purchased legally, surveyed, recorded." Karen tried to interrupt, something about sound pollution and emotional endangerment, but Dale actually shushed her. That felt new. I held up my hunting permit, my tags, and a laminated copy of the county's zoning map. color-coded, labeled. Every part of my hunt was within legal boundaries. I did not discharge a weapon within HOA limits. Your fine has no legal weight. Dale scratched his head. Karen fumed like a kettle. Be that as it may, she said, we still have a responsibility to protect the perception of safety in the neighborhood. There it was again, perception. I responded, Karen, perception doesn't trump property rights. I don't need to ask permission to use my land. This isn't a daycare, it's the woods. She folded her arms like a villain waiting for her next monologue. The meeting ended with the board tabling the fine for further review. I walked out knowing exactly what would happen. They'd delay, stall, and hope I'd either pay up or forget. But they underestimated something. I was patient, and I had money. You see, I hadn't just bought the hunting land for fun. I'd been looking at the parcel for over a year. It was adjacent to a larger, privately owned tract the HOA assumed was public. Trails ran through it. Karen held guided meditation hikes on it. Kids used it as a shortcut to the elementary school. Only problem? It wasn't public. It belonged to a lumber company that hadn't touched it in 15 years. They paid the taxes, mowed the outer trails, but had zero interest in what happened on it. Until I called. We met, I made an offer, they countered, I accepted. And just like that, I owned the land that fed their beloved hiking trail. I waited a week. No need to rush revenge. Then, I posted signs on every trailhead. Partner property, no trespassing. Entry by permission only. Receptors will be prosecuted. I locked the old access gate with a brand new chain, hired a surveyor to mark the boundaries, installed trail cams every 100 yards. The first day, nothing happened. Day 2, the neighborhood group chat lit up like a wildfire. Why is the trail locked? Who put up these signs? My Fitbit streak. Karen posted a furious message calling it environmental terrorism. I replied with a screenshot of the deed transfer. Caption: Guess you should have read the actual boundaries before enforcing fake ones. Dale called me at 8 p.m. that night. I'm getting dozens of emails. People are freaking out. Not my problem, I said. They trespassed for years. I'm just protecting what's mine. Could we work something out? I paused, then smiled. Sure, start by erasing the fine. The fine gone, just like that. At the next board meeting, Dale sheepishly announced the HOA was revisiting enforcement policies regarding adjacent landowners, which was their way of saying, we messed up, and we hope you don't sue us. Karen didn't show up, probably still nursing her ego after being publicly schooled in land ownership. But while the fine disappeared, the backlash from the trail closure didn't. People started treating me like I was the Grinch who stole cardio. One lady left a protein bar taped to my mailbox with a note that said, "For when your conscience catches up to you." Another guy shouted from across the street, "Hope your boar meat tastes better than our freedom." There I ignored them, because I hadn't even started yet. The land I'd just bought wasn't some patch of dirt with trees. It was strategic. It connected two halves of the neighborhood, acted as a shortcut, a hangout, a social artery. I was the clogged vein in Karen's perfectly manicured suburban heart. I made it clear, no more access. But not because I was cruel, because I wanted them to understand what overreach feels like. Karen had weaponized community spirit to justify power grabs. Now, I was showing her the cost of playing games with someone who knew the rules better than she did. Then came the kicker. I found a clause buried in an old deed from 1987, before the HOA even existed. Turns out, the land was originally zoned for recreational use by permission of owner. It had never been public, and HOA use had always been technically unauthorized. For decades, they'd used it under the assumption no one cared. So I filed an official revocation of permissive use with the county. Now, it wasn't just private, it was legally restricted. No insurance, no access, no liability. Karen tried to rally support. She started a petition titled, "Reclaim Our Community Spaces." I responded with a flyer of my own, black and white, all caps. Park Ridge property is not a community space. Respect boundaries or lose more. I attached a QR code linking to a public page showing the full deed, zoning history, and HOA's overreach documentation. It went viral, well, HOA viral. Dozens of comments, heated debate. One meme of Karen photoshopped as Gollum clutching the bylaws, like the One Ring. The kicker? The local news picked it up. Headline: Hunter shuts down HOA hiking trail after dispute over gun use. I wasn't even mad. They called me Hunter, Landowner, and my personal favorite, neighborhood libertarian. It was glorious. Karen, she vanished, deleted her Facebook, skipped the next 3 HOA meetings. Her Mindfulness Walk Wednesdays disbanded like a boy band after senior prom. And the rest of the neighborhood? They got real quiet, real respectful, real fast. A few folks even came by to apologize. One guy brought ribs. Another offered to help clear brush if I ever wanted to reopen a portion of the trail. I told him I'd think about it. Truth was, I had something else in mind. A month later, the trails were still closed, the signs were still up, and Karen? Still nowhere to be seen. But now, something had changed. What started as neighborhood outrage had curdled into reluctant acceptance. People stopped fighting it because, deep down, they knew. This never would have happened if Karen had just minded her business. One afternoon, Dale approached me outside the grocery store. He cleared his throat and asked, "Hey, any chance you'd consider reopening the trails, even just weekends?" I looked at him, deadpan. "Under what terms?" "Well," he stammered, "maybe the HOA could offer to cover liability insurance, issue access passes, schedule cleanup crews. We're open to negotiation." I paused, then smiled politely. "I'll think about it," which was code for "you'll never hike here again." See, while everyone else had been arguing, I'd been upgrading. The land now had a brand new chain-link fence with motion-activated lights. I installed 2 additional trail cameras, a weather station, and a drone perch for surveillance. It didn't just look private. It looked impenetrable. But I wasn't just building a fortress, I was building a preserve. Behind the scenes, I'd submitted a request to rezone a section of my land as a conservation parcel. This would legally formalize it as protected habitat, exempt from HOA influence, and eligible for a local tax credit. Even better, it gave me the power to file injunctions if anyone attempted to trespass for recreation. Why? Because Karen needed to learn that bad behavior has a cost, and the board needed to understand that just because you wear a laminated name tag doesn't mean you run the world. The news eventually caught up again. Headline: Landowner declares trail a private preserve after HOA conflict. This time, I was quoted directly. Community is built on respect, not entitlement. Sometimes, the only way to restore balance is by closing doors that were never meant to be opened in the first place. I received a letter the next week. Handwritten, cream-colored paper, flowery cursive. I acknowledge that mistakes were made. I hope, in time, we can find mutual understanding and peaceful coexistence. It was signed simply, Karen. No last name, no return address, just the faint scent of lavender and ego. I pinned it to the bulletin board next to my deed, under the heading, "Not Today, HOA," and I kept the trails closed. Because sometimes, the only way to teach a lesson is by letting the silence of an empty trail echo louder than any fine, vote, or angry Facebook rant. Let them hike around it. Let them remember why it closed. And let Karen never forget she picked this fight on someone else's land. Spring rolled around, and with it came the annual HOA Community Unity Picnic. You know, the one with sad hot dogs, undercooked potato salad, and forced smiles? This year, I got a personal invite. Dale wrote, "We'd love for you to stop by and reconnect with neighbors, perhaps even share a few words about land stewardship." Nice try. Instead, I stayed home, sat on my porch, smoked ribs, and watched through binoculars as Karen hovered on the edges of the picnic like a ghost at her own funeral. She was no longer on the board. Her self-amacnized role as wellness chair had quietly dissolved. People still greeted her, sure, but it was short, stiff. You could see it in their body language. They'd seen behind the curtain. Meanwhile, I was getting requests from neighbors asking to walk the property with permission, and even one lady who offered to trade homemade honey for trail access. I declined politely, because the lesson here wasn't about vengeance, it was about boundaries. You don't get to trespass on someone's land, slap them with a bogus fine, and expect things to go back to normal when the power dynamic shifts. Karen fired the first shot, not me. All I did was aim smarter. And if you think that's petty, maybe you've never had someone try to weaponize bureaucracy against you in your own home. Maybe you've never had a neighbor who thinks her Pinterest quotes give her legal authority. But if you've ever dealt with a Karen in a khaki vest holding a clipboard like it's Excalibur, then you know the only thing they understand is consequence. So here's what I learned. Know your rights better than they know their bylaws. Keep receipts, all of them. Don't escalate. Dominate quietly. And if they fine you for something legal, buy the land they walk on, and close it permanently. Thanks for riding with me on this wild little HOA drama. If you've ever been ambushed by overzealous board members, neighbors with too much time, or a Karen with a grudge, drop your story in the comments. Let's build a wall of HOA war stories together. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe start saving for your own plot of land, just in case. Trust me, ownership is the best revenge.